You just taking a shower. You only get 3 showers a week. And then you have these guys who turn the temperature down to deter you from coming out of your cell to maintain your hygiene, right? Only because they don't want to cuff you and they don't want to do a little bit more work.
Hello and welcome to Reform Mindset. My name is Michael Rosado.
And I'm Mark Gonsalves.
We are here today with a friend of mine from prison named William DeJesus. We call him June. June has an incredible story that he's going to share with us today. Mark, if you'll take the lead on this.
June, first of all, thanks for being here, man.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah. So you haven't been out that long. How long have you been free?
So it's been about a year and 2 months, actually.
A year and 2 months?
Yep.
So it's all fresh?
Yeah, and it's going to stay fresh. If it doesn't stay fresh, you have a problem. I've been in prison. I did 25 years for robbery that I didn't do, but we'll get to that. But it doesn't matter if I was out, 10 years, 20 years. It's going to stay as fresh 20 years from now as the day that it was when I got out.
It's that saying, you never know what you've lost until it's actually gone, right? And freedom is one of those things.
That's never been more apt than when you've been to prison.
Yeah.
Because you learn by force and literally the things that you lose, not just privileges, civil rights, family, time with your loved ones, for men, women, women that same, whatever. So those things become not just for alone. They're something that is integral to the human spirit. Having someone there for you to care for, having someone that you grew up with, an old friend, you lose all of that.
So you did like a quarter century of time. That's, a quarter of a century of time, but for something you didn't actually do. So where does this all begin? How does your story start?
So I was in the street. I was mid-1999, and I wasn't a saint. I'd done a lot of crazy stuff. I was living a crazy life. I had just gotten out of prison. I'd just done 3.5 years for breaking into a house. Hillsborough County, they definitely didn't shy away from sending juveniles to prison. But I get arrested for shooting a payphone. I'm with a friend, Sean Rivera, at the time. And obviously, people say, why'd you shoot a payphone? It ain't my change. I shot the payphone. Nothing to be, nothing that I'm proud of, right? But I did, and so the police come and they arrest me after a small chase, and they arrest Sean just for being with me, and they find stolen stuff on him, and it relates to a string of robberies that him and a mutual friend of ours, Pedro, had done 2 days prior to that. Because the suspects in those robberies were 2 Hispanic males, and they clearly have 2 Hispanic males right in front of them, both of them with guns, and I'm doing something dumb, that's why they're coming in the first place. I'm assuming that their natural disposition was, where there's smoke, there's fire. And so these guys are 2 Hispanic males, guns, they have to be the suspects to these robberies. The problem was, that's not true. They committed robberies when I was not even in the same city. 2 nights prior to me getting arrested with Sean. Pedro, at the time that I got arrested, was in an apartment maybe 500 feet from the scene of the crime when I got arrested. Now, me and Sean didn't speak to the cops. We invoked our Fifth Amendment right. And that right there is something that's very difficult, it seems like, for a lot of guys. Wouldn't you say? A lot of guys. Lately, a lot of guys just don't have you got shows about this very thing where these guys are on 48, the last 48 and stuff like that. These guys talk to cops. We didn't talk to the cops. And that Fifth Amendment right is not something that most people understand. Half the time will actually cause you more harm than good. And I'm not promoting to talk to the cops. You have a Fifth Amendment right not to say anything, but cops hate it. State's attorneys hate it. The people prosecuting crime hate it because they take it as your silence is obstructing some kind of investigation, when sometimes that's not the case. But in my case, I had absolutely nothing to do with the robbery, and there was no point in me talking about it. I got arrested for shooting a payphone. That's the crime that I committed. But then because of Sean being found with stolen stuff in his pockets that related to these robberies, and me being with him, or him with me, vice versa, guilty by association, these guys said 2 Hispanic males, this has to be one of the guys. And they charged me with robbery. So even though the evidence in this crime implicates me in no way, shape, or form, not a fingerprint, not an identification, nothing, not the description. The description of the other robber was 6 foot, 6'1", dark skinned with an afro. And I've been a lot of things in my life, you know. I've never been 6 foot and I've never had an afro, you know. Yeah. So instead of just having to do some regular, what you would think that cops wouldn't frown upon, normal investigative work, these guys said, well, we got robberies, 2 Hispanic males, here we go, charge them. And that's it. And now it falls onto the state's attorney's office, which, you know, isn't fair to them either. As much as, you know, criminals, convicts don't like the state's attorney's office because of some of the things they do. Once that investigation is complete by the cops, the state's attorney's office has some semblance of an obligation to further an investigation, but basically they're getting a case and the cops are saying, here you go, we've done the legwork, all you have to do is prosecute them, make sure that you have witnesses lined up, or whatever. But the cops are what make that case. And if they say that this happened at this time or this time, when they fill out those affidavits for probable cause, that's what the state's attorney, their state's attorney's office, that's what they have to go by, you know? So it's not like they're questioning these cops, right? You think cops, they're going to do the right thing. They're law enforcement, you know? They're upheld to a higher standard, right? But that's what these state's attorneys have. But that's not what happens all the time. Sometimes these cops, to make their job easier, will say, yeah, he fit the description of whatever. Or they'll fudge paperwork, or even worse, you know, in a lot of cases, you know, and this is public knowledge. This is something that the public isn't aware of. It's the extent that I think the public seems to not understand is so heavily entrenched in the culture of law enforcement, where even the good guys will simply write down things remotely. Automatically. It's almost like something they're doing from rote memory, right? Not realizing the implication that that's going to have on a defendant that may not have committed the crime they're being accused of. And it hurts them immensely at trial. And it's something that might be an afterthought, something that was just off the top of a cop's head and said, yeah, you know what? This is what the information was. And they don't realize that putting that down can actually send a guy to prison and ruin his life.
Yeah, and you're young too, right? How old were you when this happened?
I was 18.
18? Okay.
Yeah, so me and Sean were 18, and I went to trial. No evidence against me. Witness in the case who came to court and said, I can identify the robbers anywhere. I watched them for 5 minutes, said, I can recognize Sean, don't see the other guy. I mean, and I can give you a list. There was no evidence against me. Witnesses that were saying, I don't see the guy, in reference to me being a part of that robbery. The victim herself, right, because they robbed the girl, the victim herself saying, the police told me who to pick out of a photo pack when I couldn't pick the person out. She picked Sean out. When shown a photo pack that I was included in, she couldn't pick any person in that photo pack out, right? So then the detective suggests, hey, this guy right here. And that those are things that you'd think might be harmless at the time. When you hear it, you're like, well, I mean, how much harm can that do to a case because there's other evidence? Well, in my case, there was no evidence, nothing, not a fingerprint, no forensic, nothing, absolutely nothing to tie me to this robbery except getting arrested with Sean and Sean having stolen property in his pockets. And that detective suggesting me to that victim got me convicted at trial. And the judge sentenced me to life in prison. And for those that don't understand the term, because there's a lot of misunderstanding with life, right?
Absolutely.
People from different states assume, for multiple reasons, maybe they see it in a TV show, some form of media, a movie, they hear it from a friend, they hear it in a song. Life is not 25 years. It's not 30 years. Maybe it was in Illinois, in California, in New York. Life is not 40 years, which it is now in some states too. Life is life, which means death.
Until you die.
Until you die. Life is forever.
So let me ask you this, because that seems like a very, and I'm a guy, like I believe consequences. You know, when you commit a crime, you have to do the time, right? But I also believe the time should be in accordance with what the crime is. You got a life sentence for being accused of a robbery?
That's right.
Was anybody hurt in the robbery?
Everybody asks that. That's the first question that I think every single person that has ever asked me about what happened to me and my case has asked me. The very first, did someone get shot? Did someone die? Did you kill someone? Was someone hurt? No. I was accused of, and what these guys did was going up to a female, pulling out guns and saying, give me your money. They got her purse or her wallet and ran. Phew, that's it. End of story. That's the statement of the facts. No one was touched. No one was hurt. And it boggles everyone's mind as to how someone can be given such a draconian sentence, something that's not proportionate to the crime. You see the crime, you see the sentence, you see the severity of the sentence, and you're like, there has to be some other factors.
So comparably, think about this. I was 16 and given a life sentence for first-degree murder, for premeditated first-degree murder. Arguably, the two worst charges that you can face in the United States is treason and first-degree murder. I was given a life sentence for first-degree murder. He was given a life sentence, the same sentence that I got for killing someone, for not only a crime that he didn't commit, but a crime where no one was hurt at.
Yeah. It doesn't seem proportionate. That's something that's a Florida thing, right? Is it like that in other states?
It's probably like that in a few other southern states. Historically, I think if you looked at a map of the United States and you split them up geographically into areas like the North, the South, Midwest, right? Those places seem to follow cultural trends within their area. So in the South, they're very, very strict. The sentences for crimes are severe. And obviously, there's a lot of studies that have been done and a lot of research conducted by a bunch of organizations who show that disproportionately Black and brown defendants, whether they're men or women, are given astronomically higher sentences than their white counterparts. So a white guy can commit a robbery and get 6 years. Black guy commits a robbery. Brown guy commits a robbery. He's going to get at least 3 times that sentence. And that's a term. I mean, I can give you numbers that I feel they're subjective, but in my experience, you can just pick them. You can blindfold yourself, go down a list and just pick white, black, brown, compare their sentences for the same crime, and you're gonna see that Black and brown defendants are given 3 times higher sentences for identical crimes. Then you go back and you think, well, you know, their background, what happens? Why did this person get? And so you ask me a question. Why was I given such a harsh sentence? So it would be easy for me to generalize and say, you know, I got it because I was Puerto Rican, right? You know, and yeah, I'm repping, you know, I'm Puerto Rican. I got it because I was brown. I got it because I wasn't white. I got it because I had a public defender. I got it, which is in part true. I got it because of a bunch of reasons. And they might all generally be true. But in my case, it was very specific. The judge that I went to trial with, that sentenced me, had it was overt, a very, very obvious message that she sends to her defendants that go to trial and don't take a plea from the state, which is, if you go to trial, I'll give you the max, which is within her right. But when you consider what it's doing, it's deterring someone who is innocent. Mind you, I'm saying that I'm innocent of the crime. I wasn't innocent. I've done a lot of things that I'm not proud of, things that back then I was probably ashamed of too, but things that I can tell you today as a 44-year-old man. I regret doing, that I got away with. Not that I got caught for, that I got away with. So there seemed to be some balance for me, you know, a karmic balance that I was like, well, you know what? I've done a lot of stuff, never any robberies, never robbed anyone. But I've done other crimes and I got away with them. And I never thought, well, you know, the crime matched the severity of the sentence, because I've never done something that would deserve death in prison, which is what a life sentence is. A lot of guys, you can see documentaries and shows, and they'll compare a life sentence to the death penalty. And in a lot of ways, people that don't have that kind of sentence, they can't relate. And no matter where they do their time in prison, no matter how much time they've done in prison, if you don't have a life sentence and you have a release date, you have some semblance of being free, right? One day, even if it's at 60, you are completely different, in a completely different set of circumstances than someone who is told you are never getting out. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you behave. It doesn't matter if you wild out, if you lose your mind. It doesn't matter if you become the most devout Christian, Buddhist. None of that matters. Whatever you do with your life from this point that we sentence you until you die makes no difference to us, because you're gonna die incarcerated. And so the parallels of a life sentence to someone who has a death penalty, the death sentence, at least in part, you know when you're gonna die, because they have a date for you. Yeah. The governor signs the death warrant and says, hey, this is this certificate. You're about to die at this point. It's your appeals that prolong it. And despite the death penalty being the most severe sanction in the history of our country, nothing obviously is more absolute than death. But as a punishment, you still have like amenities as a person who's living in death row under the death penalty, right? They separate you, you're segregated, they give you TVs, they let you, even in Florida, if you look up the statutes, death row inmates are the only inmates allowed to use tobacco. Tobacco is prohibited by law in Florida, in Florida prisons, but not for death row inmates, because hell, they're gonna die. We're gonna execute them. So the parallels are very similar. It's hard to.
So you end up getting sentenced for a crime you didn't commit, right?
Right.
After that, you know, they move you, they put you into whatever institute you start off in. Did you believe that you were going to die in prison at that point? I mean, is that what you accepted? Is that the belief that you had? You know, you thought, oh, maybe this is karma getting me for other things. But did you believe you were going to die in prison?
I don't know that. Obviously, for sure, at the beginning of the period when I was starting my sentence, I don't know that I accepted. Like, I don't know that my brain processed that I had a life sentence. I think that because I was so young, I was 18, I somehow became delusional enough, and I'm still immature enough, that I didn't accept that being reality. I was accepting my circumstances that I was in prison, but I wasn't accepting that I had a life sentence. It wasn't until I was about 4 or 5 years into my sentence, when all of my appeals are now denied, and I have absolutely no hope of being free again, that I started to realize, wow, this is for real. I'm gonna die in prison. And I think that it changes you. It makes you either fight for your freedom with every single possible moment that you have, or you succumb to the madness of hopelessness. And there's no feeling like hopelessness. I've been sick. I've been stabbed. I mean, I've gone through some pretty physical, very severe trauma. Nothing compares to hopelessness. Hopelessness isn't even like grief, because grief, you know, you mourn for someone that dies. And once you accept the fact and the grieving period passes, you can get over that. You can never get over hopelessness. hopelessness is the very bottom of a pitless hell that has you spiraling. It's hard to even define or describe. It's not despair. It's like a despair and anguish and agony, and there's so many different emotions that go through that you go through when you're experiencing hopelessness, but nothing that can verbally describe. No fancy, elaborate use of semantics can describe what the feeling of hopelessness is. Hopelessness is, I don't care if I see tomorrow, because I'm not going to see tomorrow. I might not see anything, and you're dead to everyone and everything. Nothing has an effect on you. No matter how stoic you can be, you can't develop some kind of defense system mentally to prepare you for a stage of hopelessness.
Yeah.
And I know that you can relate in some ways to some of the experiences that I've had, because you had your own personal encounters in Colombia.
What you're saying is exactly right. I mean, it's a life without hope is actually not a life.
Right.
I mean, you're just there. That's it. But when did that change for you? Well, first of all, so you're in prison. You come to the realization that is your new life. What do you do next? I mean, do you this is not your first time that you went down, and so you have experience in the system.
Right.
What was it like in the beginning? And, you could have either just gone crazy in there because, like you said, anything you would have done doesn't matter.
Right.
There was no incentive for you to behave.
I did go crazy in the beginning.
You did.
So because, you have nothing to look forward to. And so it didn't matter whether you're good, whether you're bad, right? So you get in there and you have this chip on your shoulder. I can only speak personally. I don't want to assume that everyone who is young and has that severe of a sentence will experience the same things I did, because we all deal with them differently. And I've seen some guys deal with them stronger. I've seen a lot of guys deal with them in a lot weaker ways. Me personally, when I got to prison, because I had already been to prison, you develop a way of acclimating a lot easier. So you actually try to do your best to make your time easier. And so the only way to do that, especially for someone young, is to go with the flow, right? You don't want to think about anything difficult. It's going to bring pain. You don't want to associate your circumstances with anything from the outside world because it's painful, right? You think about your mom, you miss her, your sister, your brother, you miss those. So you don't think about those things. And the further you push them away, your family, your friends, the outside world, the more disassociated you become from not just civilization, but from emotion, because you're pushing those emotions out of the way so that you don't have to deal with them because you don't want to break down, right? You don't want to feel that. You don't want to feel that pain. And you find a way, at least I did, Unfortunately, I projected all of that anger, all of that resentment, all of that sense of unfairness and being dealt the wrong hand. I projected all of those feelings onto other people, not just the wrong people, but in the wrong ways, sometimes violently. And for young guys in prison, the system, they don't care. They just, it's so easy. It's a cliche, like, the system doesn't care, the system doesn't care. But it's not until you're living in the system that you realize how crazy, how barbaric this can be. Because most people have this idea of the government protecting people. They think people are ethical. If this guy's superintendent of this, or he is meant to uphold, these standards. These people don't care in prison. It is a beast onto itself. It will swallow you whole, and no one that works there gives a damn. And so it's very easy to fall into streams of violence with other people. And there's definitely enough people in there that'll give you cause to be violent. Am I right?
Absolutely.
I mean, these guys sometimes wake up. I'm not saying that I wasn't one of them. I hope that I wasn't one of them. But some of these guys wake up with nothing on their mind but fucking with someone else. And they literally think, how can I fuck this guy's day up? If you have any kind of light to you, anything positive that you go in there with, it's stripped. So once you disassociate yourself from the world, reality, from emotions, from feeling, you become, and I'm not going to say a zombie, but you definitely become more in touch with your animal nature and less in touch with humanity. You are less empathetic. You have absolutely no care for humans. And so it's nothing, someone out here might see someone hurt someone out in and say, wow, oh my God, I can't see. People in there are like, so what? And some people do that to survive. It's hard to understand. I can't imagine what you had to do when you were in the jungle. The things that you do to survive, people are not comfortable with trying to understand that some things are necessary that are uncomfortable in order to survive. So
it's a different world, and you described disassociation perfectly, because that's also a survival mechanism, is to disassociate with the things that are important to you, because sometimes going there mentally is actually painful, thinking about your family and how you'll never be able to be with them again. It's too painful to even go there. So you just black that out and create your own little bubble. Is that how prison is, though? I mean, because you also have an opportunity to build bonds there, right? You get to know other inmates.
You do, because you start to see that not everyone there is a degenerate. Not everyone there is looking to scam or scheme you, manipulate you, deceive you, but the majority are. And I'm not sure that it's a product of prison. I mean, obviously, we're not at church. These guys we're not at a reform school for, the Jesuits, or, these people are here because they've already done, some crazy stuff, right? Criminal stuff. So when you do bond with someone in prison, the bond is so much deeper. It's almost like the military, right? Because these guys, you might have a neighbor that you get close to. You guys have cookouts. You guys invite family members over. You guys come over for the holidays. But that's almost as far as it goes. Even if you build a really healthy relationship with that person, a friendship, the most that you probably are going to see are, hey, man, here goes a gift, or someone has a tragedy. You're there. You can take care of the kids. Hey, can I borrow some money? Things like that. In prison, sometimes those bonds are over life and death. Prison is violent, and you'll have guys who attack people, kill people, right? They use knives, they use locks, they use whatever they can. So you might have a guy that, like your neighbor, you would never know how far your neighbor would go for you, because you're never, well, let me not say never, but you're most likely never going to get put in a situation where you have to decide if you're going to help your neighbor while he's being attacked with a knife, because you are risking your life. And the chances are that you're not. You're here, you're free, and you have a family. So you're going to say, no, I'm not going to risk my life to save my neighbor's life, because my family or myself means more to me at the moment than that. But in prison, when you develop a friendship with another guy, it's not just fraternizing, right? But you build a camaraderie that's so deep, because your choices now reflect the type of people that you attract or the people that you repel. And so you join a gang, and in prison, you don't know this guy, right? Or say that you're in a gang, I'm in a gang, he's in a gang, right? And I don't know him, but we're in the same gang, right? I'm now obligated to risk my life and my livelihood for something that he has done. His choices now have consequences on my life. And that's not a choice, right? Because the choice that I made to join the gang has foreclosed any kind of free choice I might want to not make that decision, right? But now, even though I don't know what this guy's into, this guy could have gotten himself into a gambling debt, which happens frequently, or a drug debt, which happens frequently, right? Which I've had myself. So I'm not separating myself from any of the shenanigans that, happen in prison. Definitely not all of them, but I'm guilty of some of them. But I don't know him, and he has a gambling debt or a drug debt, and now guys who he has a debt to, they want to hurt him because he has no way of paying. So it's a deterrent to someone else who wouldn't pay that might find themselves in the same situation. So now I'm obligated to help him versus having a friend that you develop a relationship with that says, hey, brother, if you got any problems, I got your back, because I can see Mark is a stand-up guy. Mark doesn't steal. He's not a snitch, which, are the list of values, right, in prison. And he lives by the same principles that I live. So I got Mark's back. But then when we get close, if I have 2 soups or even 1 soup, right? Hey, bro, you hungry? You can get half of that. I hardly doubt out here, those experiences are not, and even when you grieve, right? You'll come to me because you're not gonna grieve out in the open. People will ridicule you for that. Prisoners are relentless and merciful. I mean, they have absolutely no mercy. They are merciless, right? So they have no sympathy when they see someone whose loved one died, right? They're like, suck it up, man. Come on. This is prison. You got to get with the game.
Yeah.
Or you're going to get rolled over.
So, June, let me interject real quick.
Yeah.
Again, what he's saying is absolutely factual, but I wanted to put something else in there. When I first met you in 2000, we were in a Gladiator dorm together. We were a part of the same criminal organization.
Right.
We developed a bond that superseded that.
Correct.
And that carried over to another institution where we were locked behind doors 23 hours a day. So I want to say this. From the time that I met you, from the very first instant that we really started to bond, you have maintained your innocence. And even now, when we talk on the street, you have maintained that innocence. People that are guilty of a crime don't maintain the innocence the way that you have. There's no reason to. You could have shared that bond and been like, yeah, whatever.
Which most guys do. They're like,
Yeah.
hey, man, I fucked up. I did X, Y, Z. I mean, and even now, I'm not getting anything out of it. What purpose would I have to continue to repeat something that wasn't true? Okay, well, I did the crime and I'm innocent and I'm going to claim I'm innocent until I get out. Well, and I'm out.
Mm-hmm. So
what's the point of me continuing to insist I'm innocent?
That's what I'm saying.
What am I getting out of that?
You don't get guys like that. You don't get that. That's a rarity. You're a gem as far as I've known, or you wouldn't be sitting where you're at talking to the people. And yes, there are problems with our justice system. I can say this much: since the time I was locked up in 1998 to now, the justice system has slowly crawled out of a pit of a lot of things. Since 99, when he was arrested.
Slowly is an understatement.
Slowly is an understatement, but
Crawling.
It is making progress. And we do know that under the age of 25, brain development for teenagers isn't, your brain isn't fully developed, or else they wouldn't have came out with the laws that eventually set me free. So him at 18, he was still rash. He still had that undercurrent of an unculpable brain. So I asked the people not to judge him because he shot a payphone, which is an inanimate object, and did really no harm in the scheme of things, right? And, I made comparisons about my life sentence and his life sentence. My life sentence was justified. I did something that I deserved to go to prison for. This man sat behind bars in some of the worst conditions. He went to one of the worst institutions in the state of Florida that I was with him at, and where they didn't care about you during that time, where I talked to them about how they would turn the temperature down on the shower to make it very cold to deter people from going to the shower.
And staying in there. Yeah.
And staying in there, and how a lot of people wouldn't go to the shower.
Yeah, to avoid. Can you imagine that? You're just taking a shower. You only get 3 showers a week. And then you have these guys who turn the temperature down to deter you from coming out of your cell to maintain your hygiene, right? Only because they don't want to cuff you and they don't want to do a little bit more work. And in their eyes, what's work? What they're getting paid for.
Yeah, the movement, right?
I mean,
the
movement.
the transportation.
They don't want to come and open the flap and cuff an inmate to take him out to go to shower. So they're like, you know what? I got an idea. Let me turn this temperature down so it's freezing cold, and these guys are not going to want to shower. and makes my job easier and keeps these guys filthy.
Mark, have you ever experienced
sense
that?
does that
I want. Have you ever experienced something like that in your captivity, to where your captors did something to make you uncomfortable, to make less work on themselves?
Oh yeah, no, all the time. I mean, the FARC were extremely lazy, so that was just a normal for them. Like they wouldn't bring us food, simple things. Simple things, just carrying food, and that was normal. So
That's insane, man.
in a way, I can relate to that.
Oh, I know.
How did it feel? How did it feel for you, June? Because I know you. This is personal, and I know Mark has some more questions, because Mark's that guy.
Yeah.
Like when I first met Mark talked to me first of all spiritually. And if you ever want to talk about a miracle, a true miracle in the middle of a jungle, in the middle of nowhere, that's your guy. If you guys have not watched Mark's story yet, please go back and watch our first 4 episodes. Mark's story will leave you wondering about your own faith possibly, and believing in the human spirit, just the human will to survive a horrible situation. But June, how did it feel all those years? You had to be angry that someone else is out there enjoying their freedom, and here you are inside a cell for a quarter century, for all your good years, for all of your 20s, for part of your teens.
Well, don't say all my good years. I hope
You got some more left?
I hope I still got some left.
Well, I mean, listen, you do still have some more left, but those are years that people consider their good years.
Yeah, sure.
Their 30s.
Sure.
You missed all of your 30s. You missed all of your 20s.
Sure. I missed all my teens.
You missed all your teens, bro. Like, how did you wake up every morning, man?
By force. By being told, chow, get up, chow. My mom is a very devout Christian. And when I say devout, I don't mean she's ritualistic, or she's sincere. Her relationship with Jesus, her relationship with God, you don't have to believe it in God in order to see her spirit and how radiant her spirit is. And so it'd be easy for me to say, man, I put on the infinity gauntlet every day and said, I'm going home. I'm going to go get those stones, which I would love to believe, but I know that the reason that I made it every day was because of my mom's prayers. And that might not seem a convenient answer to how someone can cope mentally with having a life sentence, being sentenced to die in prison, and finding a way to survive because there's no reason to. But it was my mom's prayers. And I know if I have a guardian angel out there, I know he's ready for me to die so he can fade me. He wants to fight me because I put him through some stuff, bro. Listen, I have done some dumb stuff. Well, as he was saying earlier, the studies that were introduced to the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, in order to achieve a lesser sentencing procedure, a more fair sentencing procedure for juveniles, showed that neurologically, the human brain, male or female, black, white, green, yellow, whoever you are, right? The human, a Homo sapien, the brain neurologically is not developed fully, typically, until you're in your early to mid 20s. People that are in their teens, even in their 20s, are impetuous. They make rash decisions. You have laws that don't allow the sale of alcohol and, in some states, tobacco products to people who are under 21, but you have thousands and thousands of people that are under 21, 21, 22 in prison with life sentences. How you can attribute the culpability of a person's choices because of a crime that they committed to a degree that allows a judge to sentence them to die in prison, but yet don't feel that they're responsible enough or old enough chronologically to buy alcohol or tobacco is mind blowing. I can't make sense of it. There's nothing that I can think of to reconcile something that simple. You're saying that these people are not mature enough to make a conscious choice to buy a cigarette or alcohol, but they're mature and responsible enough and culpable enough for me to sentence them to die in prison because of a choice that they made. You know, and I don't want to sound like I'm trying to promote some things that guys do when they're in their late teens and 20s, right? As it always being a matter of their impetuosity or their impulsiveness, but I just haven't met. There's not a single time in my life in prison have I ever met someone that was in their 20s that I took seriously. Because every single person that I've ever known that I knew from the point when they were in their late teens, 20s, meet them 20 years later and they're completely different men.
And this goes to show something, right? Because again, when you met me, I didn't laugh. I didn't joke. I was a very serious person. I played no games. I wouldn't play chess. I wouldn't do any of that. I was very serious. I was very militant. I was very gang related. This was my life. This is what I was going to do. Now, completely different person. Very laid back. I like to laugh. I like to joke. I like to hang out. I mean, the disparity, even now. You were a gritty person when I first met you. We used to compare you to The Rock. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to compare you to The Rock.
Can you smell?
Yeah, because he was very muscle bound. Like he was working out every day, and you see them glasses on, the eyebrows shoot up, and we had him there. But now the man I know today, in fact, that's something I would like to ask you. Your day-to-day life, one thing I know is that you care about 2 of your family members are in your care. Can you talk about that a little bit? Can you tell Mark about that, please?
Yeah. So I have 2 autistic nephews. 2 nephews who have autism. Special, right? They have a condition and they're on whatever the spectrum is, they're on the extreme end. You know, they're nonverbal. These guys are so intelligent. And when I came home, some of the facts of my case, like I told you before, were that the guy that did the robbery confessed, and I had to get lawyers. We went to court, and we had a mutual agreement with the court. Something that I can say wasn't 100% mutual, only because I was getting a very, raw deal. Something very beneficial to them, considering that this is the guy that committed the crime confessing to the crime. But that aside, when I came home, I immediately had a car. I was living with my aunt, wasn't living with my parents. And so I was blessed. I was fortunate because I was given a lot of tools that are necessary in order for you to succeed. A lot of guys that probably find themselves going back to prison a short time after they get out of prison, it's usually because they don't have the support or the things that they need to make a constructive life. And I can never take for granted, and I won't undersell how important it was for me to have people in my life that were very, very supportive, which wasn't always the case while I was in prison. And it made my time in prison difficult. But like I said, I had my mom praying for me. I had angels over me even at my hardest times, and didn't realize it then, at least. I do realize it now, because when it's hard and you're walking in it, you're like, this isn't right. It doesn't feel right. There's no way that there can be a compassionate, powerful, a sympathetic, caring God when I'm sitting here suffering and kids suffer and all that. But I know now what I didn't know then, which was there was a purpose for that I'm grateful for. Because had I not been able to go through that, right, I know that God wouldn't have allowed me to go through that because of my mom's prayers. Not for anything that I did, But I know my mom was on her knees every night praying, begging, pleading with God, please keep my silly ass son from harm. And now that I've gone through all that, I've developed, because of it, and you can say despite it or in spite of it, the compassion, the patience, the kindness to be able to help my nephews who need it. And I didn't need it because I didn't deserve it. You know, there was times when I was an asshole, and there's no mild way to put that, you know? And I projected a lot of my own issues onto other people that they didn't deserve that either, you know? And I had a lot of support. But now my nephews, they're 9, they're twins, Jeremiah and Jasiel. My sister, she's got her hands full. So they're with my parents, but my mom, you know, takes care of them because they're in better hands for the moment, you know, until my sister, you know, gets a little bit more stable. But I'm with my parents now. And when I tell you I spend every second of my free time with those guys, it's incredible. And these guys don't talk. I mean, these guys, sometimes they'll look up. They're not even paying, you think they're not paying attention to you. And they might point in some form or fashion like, and they make noises. But so you would automatically assume, and naturally, like, oh, these guys, you know, are probably kind of slow. My nephew, one of them, Jasiel, he was on TikTok. He had a little TikTok page. And they do crazy stuff. They climb, they crawl, they bite, they scratch, right? It's a part of their condition. They're special, though. This guy, you can't tell this guy, I mean, you can't tell him to do anything because it always looks like he's not listening. This guy had a TikTok page. They banned him from going live because they realized he was a kid. He wrote like a 3,000 character complaint, an email to Google and TikTok saying, I'm not a kid, undo the ban. This guy this guy is great. I got videos of him, man. He's amazing, bro. You know, I take these guys out. So it's been an anchor for me, fortunately, in my life as well. They've been a blessing to me, not me to them. If anything, they helped me.
Yeah.
You know, because the times, and I can't count them, but the times that I've been asked out since I've been out, which happens to a lot of guys that get out, you know, they get asked out and it seems very simple. It's innocuous. It's harmless. At first, you're like, this is nothing, man. I'm just going to go out and have a few beers, maybe hang out with some of the bros. How fast that can lead and how fast most times it does to something much more sinister, right? Doesn't even have to be drugs. Guy can say, hey, bro, man, come out, man. We're going over here. And the next thing you know, he's talking to this girl. The girl has a guy. He doesn't know. And I'm like, bro, I just came out to get a beer. Like, bro, right?
Yeah.
Like, bro.
Yeah.
He always wants to go out. And I'm like, bro, I'm good. I'm home. I'm with my nephews, or I'm going to take them to a park, right? I value that time. I don't know how much time I have left. I know how much time I lost. So I'm not going to make up for that time because you can't. I can't go back and have, we can't go back and have a homecoming. We can't go back and try to catch up to the guy who's been out here working, saving, living, experiencing, has his own house, has his own car. You have to accept that loss, bro. You got to take that L and say, I'm going to start from here. But some of these guys seem to see other people and they're like, well, he's got a car, you know, he's got his own house, you know, so he can go do what he wants. And, you know, he's got a phone, he's got this, he's got that. And they're like, I got to get the money to catch up to him. But you can never catch up to these people, man.
Yeah, no, it's not a competition.
Credit. You don't go from 530 credit score to 850 in 2 weeks just because you got the bag and you hit a lick. Like, it doesn't work like that. You know, you have to take that L, start from scratch. And if that makes you feel like you're in a position that you don't deserve, then you really don't know what that word deserve means. Because none of us deserve anything. Some people deserve kindness, right? And that's it. The government doesn't owe you, and they're not going to ever accept that they owe you on your terms. If they owe you, they're going to do it on their terms. And if you can't accept how the game is played, you're never going to win the game by trying to change the game. And some people think that highly of themselves, that they're like, man, I got it right here. I'm playing chess, not checkers. I'm going to change the game in order to win the game. No, bro. First, play the game how it's meant to be played. And then once you're ahead, then you can do some things to put yourself in a much better position to win the game than sitting here trying to change the game and you're starting from scratch.
So let me interject real quick because we're going to have to start wrapping up.
Okay.
Mark, I know do you have any more questions that you specifically want to ask June before we wrap this up? And June, I ask you to keep these limited just for now because we are running out of time.
For a comment about your nephews, that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
That you have the privilege to participate in.
Yes.
But it's wonderful too that you have a support network. You know, that I think that's the key to any reentry. When somebody comes out of incarceration, a lot of guys, everybody is going to need some level of support, you know.
And the government doesn't provide it.
No.
They might give you $50 on your way out.
You're on your way. Yeah. They give you a bus ticket.
I don't know what you're going to do with $50.
A bus ticket and $50.
In this economy.
So having family is imperative. Groups like the one I volunteer for, I mean, we try to help Charlotte Reentry Initiative. That's part of what we do is help with reentry. And I think it's the key. It's something that we as a society need to work on. When we have guys that paid their due to society, you know, they made a mistake, but they paid for it. We can't we need to, as a society, be more thoughtful in providing support because just like you mentioned, if not, it's so easy to fall back into those old habits. Yeah. And that's why you see guys, it's like a revolving door for a lot of guys. They go in, they get out. They go right back in, they get out, they go right back in. And if we're smart about this as a society, we can stop this.
I believe that. I agree with you.
But something else that you had mentioned, and maybe we should go there next. You said somebody confessed for the crime that you were convicted of.
Right.
What's that? What happened? What's that about?
So after all my appeals were denied, some years after all my appeals were denied, in prison, it's common knowledge that now with the advent of cell phones, you know, most guys have cell phones, or at least most guys can get access to cell phones. So
in prison,
yeah. So at this point, I was at like my 12th prison. I'd been to a lot because fights, CM, which is closed management, just another form of confinement. And so I was at Okeechobee, and then I had a cell phone, and you pay top dollar for the cell phone because they're hard to get. They're not as easy as in the movies, but they're also not as hard as people think. So I had a cell phone, had a Facebook page, and a few friends had reached out to me to tell me that this guy Pedro, who committed the robbery with Sean, had confessed to them about committing the robbery, that he felt whatever he felt at the time about having me sitting in prison for a robbery that he did, but he didn't feel compelled enough to tell law enforcement, and that it wasn't his problem because he wasn't the one who got me locked up. And while technically true, obviously he didn't get me locked up, it's not his fault that I was in jail. It's the system's fault. And I was upset with him because when you asked me how did I, deal with that every day, I was angry, and I was angry more at the system than I was at any one in particular person, because the system should have worked. And I had that delusion. I felt like we're in America. The system's going to work. If you're not guilty, you're not going to fall. And I had that delusion and that idea ripped apart in shreds and slapped in my face, because that's not how it happens in the real world. That's how it happens in movies, where at the end of the movie, after a guy's in there for something he didn't do, somehow someone saves him and he gets out, or somebody confesses or something, some magical moment takes place. That's not reality, So I'm not the only guy that's in prison for something that he didn't do. I know guys that are in prison with the same sentence that I had for the same crime. and similar circumstances. And the law clearly says that when that's the case, then there should be similar sentencing. I mean, it even goes to the extreme of having one case, well, actually several, that say when the facts are the same, the law should be the same. Similar circumstances require identical sentences. But yet you'll have a guy sentenced to robbery for 2 years and a guy sentenced to robbery for life. There's absolutely no bigger disparity than to have someone who's sentenced for the same crime, sentenced to 2 years, and someone sentenced to the same, to life for the same crime. Do you know what I scored out to? There's a sheet when you go to jail, or when you get arrested and you go to trial and you go to sentencing, right? Whether you go to trial or not, when you go to sentencing, Florida has a criminal punishment code. So in the late 80s, early 90s, they had a sentencing guidelines, and there was a guideline that the judge was suggested to sentence you within, say 1 to 8, or 2 to 9, or 2 to 10, or something like that. And throughout the mid 90s, they were dabbling with that. But then the feds changed their system because it was similar to Florida. Florida seems to try to follow the feds so that they're within, constitutional muster, right? So that they pass constitutional muster. And I think it was the late 90s, maybe 98. I want to say it was October the 1st, 1998. They came out with the criminal punishment code, which changed the way that a judge sentences you. So if you came before a judge, there's a checklist in late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s that says your crime, your criminal history, and they total it up. It's a calculus, right? They have put a numerical value on the crime and your past history so that a judge doesn't have to even see you to see whether you're white, black, Asian, green, an alien, whether you're rich, you have a public defender, or you have Barry J. White as your lawyer, whoever. All they have to do is go by that calculus, and that calculus would recommend a fair sentence. Now, in 98, they changed it under the ruse of being it was unfair before that a judge could sentence a person with such a big disparity because a white person with this crime might be given this much because the judge had too much flexibility or didn't have enough, something like that. So take for example, a guy that commits a robbery from the hood, some black guy, right? He commits a robbery. His sentencing value is 6 years. He comes from a broken home, has a messed up family. Then you take this white guy. He's from the suburbs, does the same crime, commits a robbery, right? Numerical value for the sentencing is 6 years. The judge should give both of them 6 years. But the government complained, mainly more the judges, complained, and these crafty lawyers that have agendas, they complained that, well, this guy from the suburbs just got caught up with someone else, that's not his pattern, even though this black guy has no pattern either, right? And then they'll say, well, this guy's from the hood, he didn't go to school, and he has a robbery, You give him the same damn time. You don't come up with reasons as to why. But I also understand that there are circumstances. Maybe this guy was just with a friend and he got but that's not the judge's job. That's the state's job, right? Because they're going to say, well, Mark was with Mike. Mike decided to do a robbery. Mark shares the same culpability. So we're going to give Mark the same amount of time, right? I can understand that. But that's not for the judge to determine, because guess what? There's such thing as robbery accessory. The state doesn't have to charge you with robbery, but they do. And that's where judges complain. Well, he's not really as culpable as him, right? But so then the state should amend the charge because there are such things as accessory, which have a lesser numerical value in their sentence. So anyway, in 1998, they came out with the criminal punishment code that says a judge can now sentence every defendant in Florida from the minimum to the maximum. So second degree felony is 15 years? 15 years, right? A second degree felony, whatever second degree felony, is 15 years. But there is a numerical value that suggests what the minimum should be, right? And that minimum is in a number of months. So this criminal punishment code sheet says, what's the crime? This is the point value. This is the point system. And then they fill out how many months it is recommended that the least possible minimum term of years or months that a judge can give you. If they go under that, they have to give a reason why they're departing under. And so mine was 60 months. Sean's was 113 months. Sean got 113 months. Even if you didn't believe that I was innocent, how did Sean get 113 months? He didn't snitch. He didn't say, hey, Pedro did it. He didn't say, I did it. He didn't come to court. He didn't testify. If he did, I wouldn't have been in prison. Nobody can say that Sean did anything that affected his sentence over mine. So why did Sean get 113 months as a sentence? Because that's what he got sentenced to. And my suggested sentence, my least minimum possible, was 60 months. How did I get a life sentence? And he got 113.
You were supposed to get 60 months, but it was life.
Not supposed to, because that numerical value is telling the judge what your least possible sentence should be.
And Sean didn't get a life sentence?
Sean got 113 months.
That's crazy. You got a life sentence and your co-defendant got 113 months.
And the circumstances weren't different.
And this is what would cause him anguish over 25 years and would cause him to muse over the things that he's done in his life and feel like, is there a comparability? Why is the justice system treating me like this? So on and so forth. Is there any message that you would like to say? If you had to say a short message, even if it was just to yourself as a youth, you know, when you were getting in trouble, if there is something that you want to say to the people that are fighting, that are innocent, that are still locked behind closed doors and razor wire and concrete walls, if there's a message you want to put out there, is there something you'd like to say to the people while you have this opportunity?
Yeah, I would hate to ever give anybody a false sense of hope, because I used to watch podcasts too in prison. I did on the tablet. The worst thing you can do to a prisoner who has circumstances that are similar to the ones that we had is give them a false sense of hope. Make them believe that, because even the Bible says hope deferred will make the heart sick. And all you do is become a zombie thinking something's gonna come, something's gonna happen. But I know, not just from what I've learned since I've been out, seeing the people, not just because of you guys, but I know that even though the change is slow, change is coming. Change is gonna come. I might not be at the forefront. I hope I am, you know? I hope that you guys are. But even if you're not, I know that change is gonna come. And it's hard, because when I was told that I was gonna get a deal from the state to just be getting time served and get out, my lawyer said, please stay on your best behavior. And I was like, for what? None of that matters, right? And I was wrong. They went through my DR history, and I'd been to court at least 9 times. They never once questioned what I was doing in prison. I had DRs for having a cell phone. Multiple. Never once did they ever question my behavior in prison. So my message would be, change is gonna come. The only thing that you can do is be good to yourself and give yourself the best chance, because nobody else is gonna care. If you don't give yourself the best chance, why should anybody else?
That's a good closing. Mark, is there anything else you would like to add? One thing I know is that you relate to the guys. You're relatable, man. You come in, you see people, this might be your first time talking to somebody who's actually innocent. I mean, you go in and see all the guys that are,
Yeah. That's the thing. Like I heard your story, and I heard that you maintained your innocence. And, I'll be honest, the first thing I thought was, everybody says that. Everybody says that. It's true, man. It's true. I mean, where I work, there's guys that own their actions, and they're not trying to hide who they were in the past, because they're in the process of an evolution anyways. But there are guys, there's a lot of them that say they're innocent. And so, I heard about your story, and I'm like, let's see. But then I found out that somebody actually confessed to doing the crime that you were convicted of. Added to that, you've always maintained your innocence, but in a very private setting. In prison, what I noticed is there are certain people, they like to actually brag about what they did. It's almost like a badge on your shoulder, or something.
Especially when they glorify violence. When they kill someone, like, I murdered somebody.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know if it's just to gain a reputation or whatever reason, but there's a lot of guys that are like that. So when I started to get into your story a little more, I'm like, whoa, this guy actually didn't do it. So he's the first one that I know of,
and there's a bunch more,
There's others,
hard.
yeah.
It's hard to identify them, because it's like everybody says they didn't do whatever they are in there for, but there are.
Yeah.
I know guys that I met on a personal level. Not, hey, this guy told this guy, read cases, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe it,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate.
Well, June, listen, man, first of all, I'm glad you're out. I'm sorry that you had to go through something that you didn't deserve.
I'm not.
But
I'm not.
That's where I was going is, man, sometimes we have to sit down. We have to be forced to sit down, and who knows what path your life would have been on if this wouldn't have happened. You did shoot up a payphone, so maybe maybe this
is a blessing.
Maybe this was a good path. The thing is, you're free now. Don't let the past define who you are. You have your whole future ahead of you, man. So I'm very happy to have met you.
Yeah,
I'm really
likewise, bro.
I'm glad that you're plugged back into your family and that you're so involved in your nephews' lives. I know that means everything to them, to your family. So you got some time to make up for, but you're doing the right things, man.
Thank you so much, brother. Yeah. It was a pleasure being here, bro. I thank you guys for having me on.
You already know.
Yes, sir. I do, brother.
So serving time in a cell with this guy was an incredible experience for me also. Sharing him now in freedom is just something that I can't explain to you guys out there in the world. Having a life sentence for 19 years, then getting my sentence departed down to 40 years, and then eventually getting free. I can't explain to you that transition. The only thing I can tell you is that I've maintained my faith. I maintain my prayers. You guys that are tuning in, the people that are watching this, we ask you to stay tuned. We ask you to continue to watch for more of these great stories. We will be having We have a great lineup and list of people from all walks of life that have reformed mindsets, people that grew up with troubles and struggles and things that the typical person might not see in their day-to-day life, and how they overcame that and how they are functioning in a regular part of society and making improvements in other people's lives. Here at Reform Mindset, we thank you for watching. We ask you to like, subscribe, and comment. This is Michael Rosado.
I am Mark Gonsalves. Take care, everybody.
We're signing out. We'll see you guys later.